For people who have never heard about what happened to the USS Liberty, how could you just tell people in a brief thumbnail sketch what happened?
Okay,
put us in time and history to where we are and all of that.
Okay, we left Norfolk on May 2nd, 1967. Our normal run was up and down the west coast of Africa. When we got to Abidjan, Africa, late that month, the Joint Chiefs of Staff took direct control of our ship and ordered us to go into the Mediterranean because things were heating up between the Arabs and the Israelis. So we went to Rota, Spain first, and then we got orders to go into the Mediterranean. We were on station a couple of days before the attack, and on June 8th at 2 in the afternoon, the Israelis came out with jet aircraft and attacked our ship. We were a non-combatant Victor-class cargo ship with only 450 caliber machine guns. So for in essence, all intents and purposes, we were unarmed. I mean, the guns were only good for repelling boarders. And so when the Israeli fighters left us, we had over 820 rocket and cannon holes on the top side of the ship, not to mention over 3,000 machine gun hits.
Don Pageler was on board that fateful day. This was his first assignment. He joined the Navy in June of 1966, went to boot camp in San Diego through August, and then went to the Naval Security Group School in Pensacola from September to March.
So after the fighters, they brought out bombers and dropped napalm on us. And while we were trying to fight the fires from the napalm, they brought out 3 Navy torpedo boats and fired 5 torpedoes at us, and we took one 40-foot torpedo hole on the starboard side. The attack lasted about as long as Pearl Harbor. We were then ultimately abandoned by the White House. We got out a distress call 5 minutes after we were attacked. The 6th Fleet was ordered to recall the planes twice that were sent to help us by Secretary of Defense McNamara and President Johnson both. Why? Well, only the Israelis could ever really share with the world why, because they're the ones that did it. But Admiral Moore, who was twice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the 70s, who happened to have just become CNO at the time, Chief of Naval Operations, always said that our government had told the Israelis we would support them as long as what they did was defensive in nature. And the day after they tried to sink us is when they attacked Syria and took the Golan Heights, which obviously wasn't defensive. Being an intelligent ship, Moore always thought they were afraid we would find out that they were planning what their plans were for the next day to take the Golan.
I've heard that LBJ actually had some very colorful language about what should happen to your ship.
Yes, as a matter of fact, in my presentation I will go through this, but Admiral Geis was the wing commander in the 6th Fleet. He was over both carriers, but all air operations. When Captain Tully, who had retired in Carmel, put up his planes to come to our aid, Joe told me, he said, I had 16 planes, 4 tankers and 12 fighter bombers in the air to come to your aid within 15 minutes of getting your distress call. So it's always been a question of would they or wouldn't they have reached our ship before we took the torpedo. But anyway, Admiral Geis told my boss, Dave Lewis, who was 10 feet from the torpedo went off, when Dave ended up on the America the following day, we didn't see any Americans till the following day. He told Dave, he said, when Tully put up his planes, I radioed Washington. He said, the next thing I knew, Secretary of Defense, and told him what Tully had done. He said, next thing I knew, Secretary of Defense McNamara came on and said, recall the planes. He looked at Dave and said, I couldn't believe they were going to abandon you guys, so the only thing I could think of is maybe they thought there were nuclear weapons. So he said, I told both the America and the Saratoga to bring up older planes from below. They could only carry conventional armament. He said 90 minutes after attack started, put up a set of planes from each carrier, radioed to Washington again. McNamara came on and said, recall the planes again. He looked at Dave and said, I still couldn't believe they were going to abandon you, so I decided to push it. I asked him to authenticate his message, which in the Navy means, does your boss agree with the orders you're giving me? and which is like going over his head. And he said, the next thing I knew, Lyndon Johnson came on and said, recall the goddamn planes. I don't care who dies. I'm not going to embarrass my allies. So the White House left us for dead. I was notified that I was going to receive the Purple Heart, which was just a big survivor's guilt trip for me. And so I ended up, about the same time that they presented me with my Purple Heart, I got a letter from the State Department. And in with this letter was a check for $300. And it said, here's $300 for your wounds. Sign this document that says you agree to never sue the State of Israel. I'm not going to convince somebody who is pro-Israeli about anything about this. People are going to believe what they want to believe, and so. But once I share my story, I turn loose of it, and whoever hears it can do whatever they want with it.